Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the panel on arts and the rule of law. We are delighted to be here with you today. My name is Lesley Rosenthal. I'm the Executive Vice President, General Counsel, and Secretary of Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts. I will also be teaching a course on advocating for the rule of law at Harvard Law School this fall. I can think of no better partner to explicate and exemplify, really, the beneficial role that arts can play in bringing about a more perfect rule of law society than the Nigerian actress and philanthropist Omotala Jalade Ekeinde. Since her Nollywood film debut in 1995, this leading actress, singer, and former model has appeared in over 300 films. She has been named one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people in the world. Omotala is a fierce human rights campaigner and has founded the Omotala Youth Empowerment Program. With over 3 million social media followers, many thousands of whom are watching us here today via Facebook Live and Instagram, she has the reach and the moral suasion needed to bring about a better world. Omotala.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. Okay, so thank you very much for that glowing introduction. Today we're going to be talking about arts and the rule of law and how arts can actually be used as a tool to strengthen the rule of law. I'll start by saying a very famous quote by Martin Luther King, and he says, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." I sometimes have been in places where, in other climes, maybe outside Africa, and people have said things like, "Oh, you know, I don't know what's happening there." And I keep saying, you really do need to know what's happening there because somehow it's going to affect you. We all travel now, and the world has become a global village. And gone are the days where you'll say, "Oh, you know, I've never been to Africa," or "I've never been to America," or "I've never been to South of America." You don't even have to go to these places before you encounter the people from those places. And so how their lives have been affected, maybe directly by injustice, would come to you even when you don't go to their country. We already know today all this insecurity and atrocities that are being carried out around the world, for example, with extremism and all of that. These people feel some sort of injustice. However you want to look at it, it might be right, it might be wrong, but they feel like somehow they've not been able to express themselves in maybe a formal way. So they choose to do it informally, even though wrong, but this is how they've chosen to do it. I believe that if we have a world where justice is actually free and fair, that most of the atrocities that are being carried out around the world would actually reduce drastically. And so I talk about how we artists, because our work go as far as the air we breathe. Art and entertainment is the only tool that you really do not need to leave your sitting room or your bedroom before you see it. So many people don't listen to the news. I know my children don't listen to the news, but they would listen to music. They know Justin Bieber, they know Omotala, they know, so many other artists in Nigeria. And I come from a movie industry called Nollywood. Nollywood right now is the second largest movie industry in the world. Did you know that? Now you do. Oh, you do, thank you. So it's a very, very great platform. It's a very big platform, not only for Africa, but for the world, because we can tell our stories. We are the best people to tell our stories and to reflect and show you exactly what's happening in Africa that would invariably affect your life and everybody else's life. And there's so many other artists, even before me, around the world that have used this platform of entertainment to show how you can actually advocate. As I always tell artists, you don't have to be an activist, like an activist, or call yourself an activist to actually think about the rule of law. You can incorporate it in your music, in movies, filmmakers, little pieces here and there, in stories. So there's so many artists that have done this over the years. I'm going to bring some of them. I'm sure a lot of people know Fela the legend, Fela Anikulapo Kuti. He was a fierce activist, and in his music, he talked about the injustices and all the things that needed to be right with the government and even with the people, because a society is made up of both the government and the people. And most times, until the people actually understand their rights, the government will naturally take them for granted. Like they always say, justice is not handed over to you. Sometimes you have to take it. And so if the people are not critically thinking, or they have not been brought to a point where they understand, which is exactly what happened with the Arab Spring, they got to a point where they said enough is enough. So until the people get to a point where they say, we won't take this anymore, we believe that, government sometimes will take advantage of the situation. And so people like Fela, people like Maria Makeba, these are Africans, people like Sonny Okosu, these are musicians. We have even younger ones in my country like African China, Two-Face Idibia, we have Idris Abdul Karim, we have Omotala, and then we have the one that everyone knows, we have Bob Marley, who used reggae music, from the Caribbeans, to preach justice and all of that to the world. And so all these artists have used their platform. And then very recently in film, we have Selma. Remember David Oyelowo and the movie Selma? And then remember the music that came out of that, which also had its own life. The music was actually done by Common, and it was a very big song, and even the music, I think, won a Grammy in its own right. So these are ways that the young people, and there's so many young people that probably did not know the story of Selma. Maybe some of them didn't watch the movie, but they heard the song. And maybe some of them didn't hear the music, but they watched the movie. That's how we can use the art, as a two or more edged sword to approach injustice and to bring the message of injustice to the world and to our generation. There are so many other artists that are doing things also not necessarily about injustice, but maybe about how the rule of law per se can be fostered. And we have people who are doing things about mental health. I just did a movie myself recently. It's both. It's bringing to light some problems that we've had with PTSD in Africa, especially in Nigeria. PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. And in Africa, we don't talk about this. We don't talk about mental health. We don't talk about problems that arise from abuse. A lot of Africans are abused, and a lot of them, because we're a third world country and we're dealing with so much trauma. But we don't want to talk about it because we believe everything is so traumatic. So just get over it. Get over it and heal yourself. We've all gone through trauma. But we need to start to talk about this, and we need to start to, pay attention, especially to the children who are the next generation, and start to listen to them and understand how these things really affect them, so we don't grow, we don't end up, growing new terrorists or people who are really who are really damaged and stuff. And so this movie is called Alter Ego, and we just shot it. It's going to be released on the 21st of July, and it addresses this PTSD and how a lawyer who has also gone through trauma in her own life is now becoming a voice, for younger people and for other people, young children who have been abused in the society. Of course, she faces a Herculean task because it's not something that everyone believes in or that she would sometimes get justice for, and then she would use other means. Now, if you can't get justice from the right place, it has been proven that people will use other means. And this is one of the reasons why we're also having this forum, to also call out and cry out that the justice system needs to stand up and do what's right. Because in my country right now, a lot of people are doing it's called jungle justice. So where I believe that I cannot trust the justice system, or I cannot trust the police, or I cannot trust this to go to court and then get justice for it, then I'll take the law into my hands. So they're killing people and all these things are happening in the society. And I feel that as artists, we can also bring this to light, show people that these things are happening and that we need solutions to them.
Wonderful. So the structure will be that following this eloquent statement by Omotala, we will show you a trailer from Alter Ego. We will invite comments from the room and from our friends all around the world. And then I would like to give some examples from the US, also share some artworks with you, and then we'll have a second round of Q&A. Ladies and gentlemen, Alter Ego.
My name is Jalade.
You put your hands on the child.
I am a lawyer. I specialize in fighting for the less privileged women and children.
All right. And you don't need to pay a dime.
Against those who are listening.
This is a great case. 2 months ago, a 14-year-old girl was found at the chief's residence.
I get fulfillment out of it and put it on behind her.
Why did they go, baby?
Speaking of ours, she's broken out. They hold me.
Do it now.
My God.
I'm very disgusted about this. Black people threatening to ruin everything. Everything that I've built. That I am. That I want. That I can't. Change.
I don't feel like living for the one I made.
A woman who has put herself in the forefront of giving justice.
There's something in me I can't control it. But I was awesome today.
Those bastards fired me.
What do you call it about your chain?
Holy life is
Please welcome Miss Ada Iwe.
Get to that.
That is very selfish, bitter, and also an ambitious person. I think I've messed up.
Omotala, you could use your platform for anything. You could make love story movies. You could retire. Why do you use your platform to take up such a serious subject when you turn to the judicial figure and say, I thought you were here to protect me, and she turns away? Why you and why this subject?
Like I said earlier, a lot of us are traumatized in the third world country. We've come from so much injustice and disappointment really with the government and with the justice system. I lost my father when I was 12. My father had an accident and I was very angry. I was very angry with the government. I was a child and I was the only child for a very long time and the first daughter and still the only daughter. So I was particularly very close to my father. And so when my father was taken away from me, I felt very angry with the government because I knew the road was bad and he had an accident and that's how he died. And so I started to question things, like if the road was done, they pay taxes, if the roads were good, my father wouldn't be dead. My mother also died 10 years after, and she was ill, and she went to the hospital, and she wasn't well taken care of, kind of neglect, and I was like, wow, the hospital's not working. So these questions bother me, and I refuse to ignore them. And so for me, as a child, from when I was a child, I've always been very vocal. And I knew that I could combine all of this, the fact that I'm very vocal, the fact that I'm very angry, and I have so many questions. And instead of being destructive with that, I can channel it towards something more productive, which is getting answers for the things that really bother me. And so that was how I really started activism.
We would like to invite some questions from the audience in this round, and if there's anybody who's with us virtually, they're more than welcome to provide some questions as well. Sir, in the front row, and if you don't mind waiting for a microphone so that everyone can hear.
I'm Charles Mukandavire, a judge of High Court in Malawi. I wanted to find out from Omotala the experience, the Nigerian experience in my country, and I think it may be common in many African countries I know. The people like you, actors, actresses, musicians, artists play a very pivotal role in maybe democratization, sending messages, but I have at times observed that those who have the money can use the same artists to mislead the public. What is the experience of Nigeria?
This is very true. It's a very interesting thing that you brought up that question. And I hope that by role modeling some of these artists, they can start to see that it is possible to actually live well. Because really it's poverty, isn't it? And maybe greed. Artists really want to live well. And politicians know this. They know you have a lifestyle to maintain. So when it's time for political rallies and, you know, all this political period, they know how much influence the artists have. And so they approach them to use their platform to, you know, skew things and say things that they want the people to hear. Some artists have been able to stand their ground and say no in the face, because there's a lot of money involved. They throw a lot of money at you, and you have to be very disciplined to say no. I have been able to do this, and I know it's not easy. It's not easy, because sometimes even when you say no, it's not pretty much just about the money. They blacklist you and somehow come after you with little things that you don't even notice or you never thought could be possible. For example, maybe with tax, maybe you're not perfect in your taxing, and virtually everybody evades tax one way or the other, but you know it's not lawful, and they know that, you know, even though they're not going after everyone, they will come after you, because then they can use the same law to get you. You know, so there's so many things, or maybe security-wise, you know, and maybe getting jobs. So many artists would rather not, you know, annoy, or should I say, tread on the sensitivity of the government and just do it. But I hope that with more and more artists who are standing their ground and not doing this, and how the world, for example, I'm on this platform today, I wouldn't be here if I was, you know, playing both sides, I believe. So when people start to see the advantage or the advantages of being maybe moral, let me put it that way for lack of a better word, and standing your ground and believing in and following what you believe in, maybe when they start to see the advantages that come with it, especially on the international level, then maybe they will be more encouraged, you know, to toe that line. For now, it's very, very, it's not easy, but it's possible.
And I'll just say that knowing that there are judges in Malawi and all over Africa and all around the world who are thinking about how the arts can exemplify rule of law issues is so very important, bringing us all together for common cause.
Yes.
Ma'am?
Hi, Omotala. My name is Ufan Ali, and I'm a student in Master's in Social Work at the University of Washington. And first of all, I would like to thank you to speak for the unspeakable women who cannot come forward and talk about the sexual assaults.
Right.
And I want to just to touch base with you that sexual assault is a stigma issue in all cultures,
yes.
And women cannot forward and say that this happened to them because the stigma attached that she's going to be blamed,
yes.
Because you're wearing provocative dress,
outing, yeah,
or
outfits.
because you're passing in front of the men. That means it's another form to colonize women, the way I see it. So my question to you is, this is what you did was awareness. What are other things that you have done and in order that to bring the problem existed, to bring awareness to the society, how to overcome this problem? Thank you.
Thank you. So besides the movie that's just that we just did the premiere and is about to be released, personally as a Omotala, I have worked with One.org is an organization that was founded by Bono, and I'm the face of Poverty Success Campaign in Nigeria or Africa. And we have been talking about how I'll say pretty much female empowerment and how to listen to women and their own peculiar problems and their needs. And so these are things that we talk about. We talk about how women are affected, you know, generally in the society, maybe because of war, because of discrimination and stuff. So I use my social media. My social media, everyone knows it, you know, I use my social media a lot to talk about these things. But I'm just one person, and I hope that I can, you know, attract more and more, which a lot of artists are coming on board. We have a very wonderful singer in Nigeria who's called Waje, and then we have another one, Jalade. All of these people, and around Africa too, they all came on board on that platform as well to use their music, you know, to speak to the young people and to men. Because we want to also, because you're like the lady from South Africa said the other time, we also need to always put into consideration the different kinds of society and their belief system. I think the problem has been that when the West comes to Africa with wonderful ideas, lofty ideas, they don't put into consideration our cultural values. And when One.org came to Africa and they said, oh, we want to tackle gender equality, I'm very known to have stood up and said, no, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. There are ways we can achieve the same thing without calling it that. Because in African tradition, it's almost a taboo for a man and a woman to be seen as equal. And even though we know that this is possible, you don't want to come headstrong and say this is exactly what we want to achieve. How about equity? How about just female empowerment? At the end of the day, what we're saying is women deserve to get things for what they put in, and they shouldn't be discriminated against. But there are other ways that we can bring that in that we would not immediately have, you know, obstruction and fights and just pushback from the onset, because at the end of the day, what we want is just results, isn't it? You know, so these are the things that we need to put into consideration when we talk about women's rights and things that have to do with women. Bring in the culture, and really, it just takes patience and understanding. There are ways around it, and we will still get the right results.
And your artwork is clearly speaking to women's interests that are common to women all over the world.
Right.
Was there another question? Yes, sir, from the Philippines, right?
Thank you. I'm Tunisa from Johannesburg, in South Africa. I got two questions, probably related. To what extent do you think the repression by government of artists may be a deterrent from artists doing some of the movies that ought to be done? Philanthropist was jailed several times, and I think that was a disincentive to anyone taking his stance, but he did take the stance because he was who he is. For instance, I don't know to what extent the Ogoni tragedy under the Abacha regime has been
Incarcerated.
yes. And then the last question is, to the extent that there might be trademark infringement, how strong are the intellectual property laws in Nigeria to protect your interests as an artist, and also to encourage other artists like you to do what you have to do, but still be able to make a commercial gain from your artist's work.
So if I understand the question properly, the first question was about, to put it quite clearly, how the government is, like in Nigeria, what is it like with government interference in activism and stuff because of other artists that have been incarcerated, and so in time past, like what is it like now? Is that the question? Okay. So right now, because we're in a democratic rule, and in those days it was the military rule, they can't clearly put you in jail. So that's what I said earlier. They have to find other ways around it. And what do they use? They use the law. So that's when the law itself can be, you know, a two-edged sword. And the South African, you know, speaker yesterday was talking about post-colonial laws and in the Constitution, where we still have loopholes in the Constitution that were passed on from colonial rules, because this Constitution or these laws were written maybe to benefit the colonial era, and now that we are now taking over, we've now taken over government, the democratic government, we have not sat down to rewrite the Constitution in such a manner that it covers up any loopholes. So these politicians are still pretty much working or ruling, like military governments, because they have loopholes there in the laws that actually help them and cover them, and sometimes you can't ask them questions. If you had uprisings, there are laws there to pick you up and incarcerate you and put you in jail. They're there, they're in the Constitution, they're laws. And so I know in Nigeria there's been times where they've called for referendums and for this Constitution to be rewritten. There are amendments, they're not enough. So this is also a plea. I don't know, maybe it's the ICC that needs to do something about this, or whatever body that needs to also probably look into these and maybe somewhat bring up recommendations for most post-colonial countries, no matter how many years it has been, because I know Nigeria is like 57 or so. It doesn't matter how many years after independence it is, we need to sit down as a people and now write constitutions that actually work for the people and not work for people in government. And so, so they use that, those loopholes every now and then to still go after journalists, after artists, and so that stand up and uprise, lift up their voice against the government. The second question was about piracy, infringement on trademarks and all. In Nigeria right now, it's a big issue. The only thing that is helping us right now is the cinemas, because we didn't really have a very great cinema culture prior. We had straight to video movies, and so we had some people called the marketers, who were pretty much traders earlier and went into marketing of movies. And so they were the ones bringing out the movies, so all the power was with them, so they could pirate your own movie if you were an independent producer and stuff. Now that's getting better now, because now we have cinemas, and so you can collate data. You know how many movies for sure how many people have gone to watch your movie. But that's not enough, because DVD is still some sort of marketing or distribution, and so that still needs to be looked into. We're having talks with the government, and I know that when this is sorted out in Nigeria, because of how the significance of that industry to especially the whole Black nation and other climes, I know that that would also help other movie industries. So we're appealing to them to really do something fast, because a lot of people are looking up to us for that to be sorted out. I'm sure they're listening.
And I would like to also address the question of censorship more broadly. Artists are censored specifically because the arts are so powerful to move hearts and minds. Mm-hmm. So the arts are sometimes the very first place that the government censors are going. And we've seen this, for example, in Afghanistan under the Taliban, and even to a certain extent today, there is tremendous social pressure not to engage in artistic activity. In addition to formal censorship, there are other ways of suppressing artists and their messages. For example, economic means. We have heard about the withdrawal of funding or selective funding or favoritism funding in order to favor points of view that the government finds more comfortable than the independent artistic voice. You also mentioned, Omotala, the idea of selective audits in order to persecute artists who may be out of favor with the government. Yes. So those of us who are paying attention to the rule of law must use the artistic community as the first indicator of how well that society is adhering to rule of law principles. I'm so glad that you asked that question. As to your second question about intellectual property rights, it's of critical importance that artists be able to sustain their living based on the creative output. And oftentimes, artistic works are the first ones to be exploited, to be infringed upon, sometimes even by well-meaning fans who just want to show their love.
And cheer.
Well, that's not actually a way of showing love. You're actually depriving the artist of the benefits of their labors and their ideas. And so the legal systems must work for artists to protect their capital, their artistic capital, and that goes for copyrights, it goes for trademarks, and I'd like to extend that part of the conversation not just to performing arts, to visual arts, and to film, but also a very influential topic of conversation here 2 days ago by a Saudi engineer and her lawyer husband, that the field of architecture and the field of fashion design and other creative fields also deserve legal protection, and we must find ways of providing access to civil legal services to artists in every country and from every discipline. Could you, I'm sorry, hold for one moment for the mic.
Penny Bright from New Zealand. How do you define arts and artists as opposed to like citizen activists who use social media and YouTube to help advance the rule of law? And is there any sort of collaboration in a reasonably organised way between sort of professional artists and citizen activists?
Would you answer that?
I can certainly say that social media and campaigners can absolutely work symbiotically with artists.
Artists, yeah.
Artists can help to make a message
bigger,
most compelling, can bring about empathy in a way that not even the most skillful journalist can. And then similarly, the social media campaigners can amplify based on, for example, a 3 million follower artist.
Platform.
Exactly, to make that platform really work for everyone. May I, 2 more questions in this segment from the Philippines and from South Africa, and then we're going to see if there's anyone from the live feed, and then we're going to switch over to the legal side.
Thank you very much, Lesley. I'd just like to ask a question on the state of this alternative for independent films vis-a-vis the mainstream films. It could be that in a situation where there's no censorship, the implementation of copyright laws are there, but sometimes there is the challenge of not just creating the message, the challenge of marketing, meaning that despite all these institutions, mechanisms in place, the commercial viability of these types of films sometimes are the real challenge, meaning from production to marketing, and the cinema houses. Sometimes the cinema houses do not carry these types of
movies, yes,
of films because they do not sell, they do not hit the box office. Sometimes these types of sad realities affect the sustainability and viability of these types of filmmaking, despite the grand message and the impact of these arts.
Yeah.
And the commercial aspect kills the message sometimes. And this situation, or what are the challenges or prospects of this type of filmmaking in Africa?
I'm so glad you asked that question. I'm so glad. As you can see, that's something we try to do in Alter Ego. It is so difficult when you have movies that have themes or advocacy or any kind of message in them to compete with just purely commercial movies. For example, in my country right now, the kind of movies, the genre of movies that are doing very well are comedy. And they will tell you because people don't want to go to the cinema and they're reminded of their problems. They just want to go there and laugh and be happy and leave. So you see a lot of people who want to do movies that have themes or have messages now changing to do comedy, because at the end of the day, you're a filmmaker and you want to make your money. The money that you've invested and some profit, so you can sustain your career. And so this is a very big burden on filmmakers and even actors, because you don't also want your movie to tank in the box office, because it adds to your CV. They'll be like, oh, your last movie didn't do well, and so maybe it will affect your negotiation for your next movie. So these are things that worry all filmmakers and stuff. And so with this movie, what we tried to do, if you notice there were some erotic scenes and all of that, what we tried to do is to find the balance between sending a message and still making it entertaining enough for you not to feel like I just went and watched a documentary. You know, it's very, very hard. It's because you have to make sure that you don't jeopardize the message and that you don't jeopardize the entertainment. You know, so whereas maybe just any other filmmaker would just have to worry about his story and just have fun with it, you are trying to balance everything. And at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, is it even worth it? So I want to talk about funding. I want to also, I want to encourage, you know, maybe the World Justice Project and so many other people, NGOs and bodies who have this interest to also think about putting funds, you know, into giving funds to filmmakers who have this sort of ideas and who have this sort of projects on their minds or who are doing things in this direction already, because a lot of them are thinning out, they're leaving because it's not profitable sometimes for them. Just a few have been able to find that mix. Like I said, it's very difficult, but it is possible. And that's why we keep doing this, to show that it is possible. In my country, I took a break for like 3 years from doing films, and I made it very clear that I wanted to get back to the kind of movies that I enjoyed doing, which are this sort of movies, because there was a time when I went purely commercial. And so you do all of this, and then you achieve so much, and then you wonder what next. Something, as an activist myself and someone who's been doing this for years, and this is what I love to do, I started to do movies and I started to feel unfulfilled. And I felt like I was just doing movies for people to laugh and be happy and walk away. And I wanted to get back to these sort of movies that maybe might not be as commercially viable as, you know, the other ones I've been doing, or maybe it will be, but that at the end of the day, I feel fulfilled that I have done something good with, and that's something I can leave for generations unborn. I've done a movie called Mortal Inheritance, and that movie was about sickle cell anemia. It got me my first 2 awards. I was the youngest person in my country then to win those awards, but it was a time-changing movie. At the time when we did Mortal Inheritance, you probably know that movie, there was no knowledge, well, very little or no knowledge about sickle cell anemia. Until today, people use it in universities as, you know, a piece, you know, to teach people about sickle. And I love that. And for me, that is the reason why I do what I do. I think it's worth it.
I'll just add that artists have had to become very sophisticated business people in order to sustain the artistic independence and not have to compromise too much towards commercial ends. You'll notice here that Omotala's handle is Omosexy, and she is the master of brand building and of understanding the economics behind the artistic work. You cannot do one in a vacuum without the other.
Yes.
Dr. Mampele?
I'm Mampele from South Africa.
Oh.
I'm so grateful for the work you're doing. And given what you said about how most of our countries in Africa are still burdened by the legacy of unjust laws and weak rule of law regimes, etc. And I wonder, given your wonderful combination of being an actress and a philanthropist, to what extent could you use your status to advance the rule of law education in the school system? I imagine that art is taught in the school system. I imagine that it is taught in universities. To what extent could you team up with people like Dangote and others? So you use art to create awareness of the importance of the rule of law, and to also use it to create stories that provide edutainment.
Edutainment.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I did something recently with the World Bank, and it was exactly about the edutainment. And we're talking about how we can very seamlessly bring education and entertainment together in such a way, like I said earlier, that it doesn't seem as a documentary. Because the problem is people just get turned off when they know it's a documentary. And for some reason, they just don't want to watch. And so you already lose your audience before you even begin. And so that was what we did in that forum, in that intervention, was how do we as filmmakers who are also tending towards social justice and this sort of issues, mix entertainment very flawlessly with education, and get as many people, because it's always about the numbers. There's no point you doing it and people don't see it. How do we do that flawlessly? And there's so many people, I can tell you very gladly, there's so many people that are now beginning to bank towards that, that idea of, but I think more people need to be brought on board. I tell people in my country and around the world that, you know, the rule of law and advocacy and activism shouldn't be something that some people do. It's our life, you know. So don't look at me and think, oh, she's an activist. You know, you should be an activist. Everyone should be an activist. It is about your life. You know, it should be something you think about, something you breathe, something you carry with you in everything you do, in your way of life, in your work, the way you speak, the way you comport yourself, you know. And so if you thought that way and it becomes part of your life, even when no one asks you to do it, in little ways, you know, maybe in your filmmaking, even if it has nothing to do with edutainment, you would bring it in somehow. You know, for example, in my country, in Nollywood, there's a very popular kind of sin that we do that I've been trying to change filmmakers' minds about. In Africa, it happens a lot, and they'll tell you, oh, films just reflect the society. But I'm saying also, film can also correct the society. And so it's very popular in Nollywood that every woman, you know, when whether it's her fault or not, she has a problem with her husband, then the husband will send her packing. And then they'll shout, oh, get out, and then she'll carry her load, put it on her head, she'll start crying, she'll not start, oh, then she'll go, and everybody shout, oh, blah, blah, you know, and that's it. No justice whatsoever, even when she is not wrong. It could be her husband who cheated on her, it could be the husband broke her head, it doesn't matter. And I said, okay, so we've done this for so many years. How about we start to, because right now in my country there are helplines for women. You know, there are helplines for women to call for, you know, for domestic violence and stuff like that. How about we start to bring this into our movies? Just a little bit, just to let people know that there are other options. And these are the things that I hope that even if you're not an activist, that in your own little right, you can also, you know, incorporate into your movies.
Brilliant.
Also was about institutionalizing in the education system.
Oh.
In schools of art.
And if you don't mind, maybe I'll try to tackle some of that. You used a very important word when you and I had a private conversation earlier this week. You used the word complacency, that we start to think about our civic institutions like hot and cold running water, and it's just always there. But it's not, and it must be taught. It must be taught from the youngest age. And as Dean McGill mentioned a couple of days ago, even kids at age 3 have this basic sense of fairness and justice. It's built right into the games that they play. And if you don't latch onto it at that time and build upon it and teach them about the institutions and the way in which this justice flowers and is effectuated in their society, it could get lost. It could be the victim of complacency. One thing that my husband, who's a jazz artist, you might have heard last night at the coffee house, he and I have been gathering teams of artists and lawyers working together on rule of law issues, and we're going out to make public workshops about freedom of speech, about how do you petition your elected officials effectively, how do you register to vote, why does it even matter? And then not only are the artists leveraging the power of the stage, as you've heard about it, but we're also encouraging public library patrons and school teachers and so forth to unleash their own creative forces in support of the rule of law. Was there a question from the live feed?
Yeah. An Instagram follower, one of 3 million, is wondering in what ways can the creative industry affect change in Nigeria, Africa, and the world?
Sorry, can I hear that again?
Sure. In what ways can the creative industry affect change in Nigeria, Africa, and the world?
Oh, by speaking out. We have such powerful platforms. We don't have to do just movies or sing about it. We can use social media. Social media now is a very, very powerful tool, and a lot of us have We have great following, and people come on our social media to see what we wear, what are you wearing, jokes about the day, where you've gone to. We can use Facebook, we can use Instagram, we can use Snapchat to reach so many people that probably have not even seen our work. So I think as long as your brand is strong and your brand is reaching people in your own way, you can use your brand, or you can use your voice and your platform, your social media, to reach people and to say the things that you actually really do think.
And the answer to that lies not just with individual artists, but also with arts institutions. For example, Lincoln Center has a robust education program where we take artists and we turn them into teaching artists, and we give them a teaching credential, and we send them out into hundreds of public schools, and we teach thousands of classroom teachers, whether they're social studies or math or language arts teachers, how to infuse their lessons with the arts. So it's everything. It's the individuals, it's the institutions.
I think merging that with what the question she asked earlier, even though I'm not in the educational sector, so I really couldn't have answered that question adequately, I think it's also something to bring to fore here. I think the educational system in Nigeria needs to actually look into that. I have been to WISE, which is World Innovative Summit on Education in Qatar. I was one of the speakers there as well. And that was one of the things that we're talking about. How do we use education from the traditional idea of what education is to now begin to look at education as informal, as just what it is, just informing yourself. How do we use education, both formally and informally, to inform people about things in their lives that they need to learn? And I think that is a challenge to the Nigerian government, to the African government. How do we start to teach young people, little children from nursery schools and all of that about the rule of law, put it into the curriculum, have their role models come around and play with them? I mean, and of course, when you see a star in your school, you would naturally want to listen to them. And they tell them about how, even in schools, you can stand up for yourself, stand up for your friends, don't see someone else being, trampled on their rights or anything, and say, oh, it's not my business. And you start to teach them from a very young age, even in schools, how they can actually use their voice and speak out, I think.
I would like to now transition. I'm going to talk about the arts in the rule of law. As we've seen it really take shape in this week, and then more broadly. Justice Ginsburg, in her opening remarks, was never more animated, I noticed, than when she was talking about that opera that featured her and Justice Scalia on rule of law themes. And then we had Bill Newcomb saying that rule of law has entered the conversation in this past year like never before, with a broad meaning that works smart with other fields, with data scientists, with journalists, with civics teachers, and of course with artists. Dr. Mampele said when you're cooking for a crowd, you need a three-legged pot. The first leg is the Constitution, but she said constitutions don't alone change attitudes. You need the second leg, the emotional healing, to cleanse humiliations of the past, and that I know struck Omotala and me together. We believe that this is where artists can be especially helpful. And of course, the third leg is socioeconomic transformation. Artists can help create a socially conducive environment for the rule of law. We can help emotionally connect. We can heal wounds. We can form the basis for empathy, for new rituals for embracing the rule of law. We've been talking about sources of hope in these globally challenging times. We've been talking about technology, about youth. We would like to add a vibrant art scene is another source of hope in this troubled world. And the art, whether it's film or painting or music or poetry, can illustrate, it can dramatize, it can provoke action, it can provoke peacefulness, it can provoke anger, it can engender empathy. We should not forget that in parts of the world, as we've described, art is considered so powerful that it is suppressed, it is censored, and it is punished. We've heard about prisons in Nigeria, in Sierra Leone, and in Liberia, where cultural dancing and fabric arts have been used to lift spirits, to relieve psychological stress, to provide anger management and healing from PTSD. We even heard how the Dutch Foreign Ministry uses party spaces as a testing ground for humanitarian responses, literally, as he said, dancing our way to a more peaceful world. The rule of law isn't just an intellectual legal topic, and as the deputy mayor of The Hague says, it's not just for lawyers anymore. So I would like to give some examples of how the arts can help illustrate or demand attention for critical problems and to humanize suffering. When I studied the US results for the World Justice Project's Rule of Law Index 2016 in preparation for the course that I'm teaching at Harvard Law School, my eye immediately went to the weakest areas. Where is the United States in the most need of support for rule of law? Our worst performance is perceived fairness of our criminal justice system. With our mass incarceration, the school-to-prison pipeline, and its disproportionate impacts on Black men and boys in particular, these low marks are not surprising. How do we get past the numbness that the huge statistics engender? There's an African-American portrait painter by the name of Titus Kaphar who helps us confront these questions. Kaphar looked into his incarcerated father's history. He just had the father's first name, Jerome, and the last name. He searched prison records. He was surprised to find that there were 99 men with his father's same name in the criminal justice system. Kaphar decided to take matters into his artistic hands, and he painted a series of oil portraits of the various Jeromes based on their mugshots, and juxtaposed against the gold leaf, a nod to Byzantine paintings. You will see these paintings. Each face you will see is partially submerged in tar. The amount of tar roughly corresponds to the amount of time that that Jerome spent in prison. Titus Kaphar asks, with these paintings, what is the impact of our criminal justice system on our conception of democracy itself? One more example of how art can illuminate and perhaps spark progress on rule of law issues and challenges is Lincoln Center Education's work with incarcerated youth. We sent teaching artists into juvenile detention centers to work with the young people on poetry. It was the first time that many of them felt that their voice even deserved to be heard and had a chance to be heard. I'd like to read you one of these kids' poems. This one was retweeted by New York City's First Lady, Chirlane McRae, and by America's First Lady, Michelle Obama. It's called Won't You Celebrate With Me? And it's by a young man named Amari. And he wrote it after the poem of the same title by Lucille Clifton. Won't you celebrate with me? For life and well-being, the ground tries to hold you down and bring you down below, but the strong state of mind never breaks but only flows. Hold hands and rejoice, for every day can be worse. But won't you celebrate with me that we are still here? With Amari's strong message reaching our ears here in The Hague, I would like to now invite members of the audience to share their responses to these paintings, the poem, their own experiences or curiosities about arts and the rule of law.
You were going to say something earlier?
In different countries, there are different cultures, and from where I come from, when we want to create awareness, the best tool that is used is local artists, and they perform dramas on the streets, and people come and listen to them, and this is a very traditional way of providing entertainment as well as really creating awareness. But the question I actually had was that the movies that are being made, how much in it do you think is being presented that a woman can be as she wants to be? Her personality can be acceptable without any of the add-ons. How much are we trying to educate our girl child? Or is it possible, because fine, it is an industry which has its own requirements, it is a corporate industry, profits are required. But in doing so, are we really providing the girl child with the belief and faith that she is presentable as she is? She has a choice to beautify, but that's a choice and not something that she must do. Has that thought ever been considered or discussed?
May I ask what country you're speaking of? What country are you from?
I am from Kashmir.
Okay. So I want to believe that question is specifically about maybe people who, like you yourself, choose to cover up or choose not to use makeup or choose not to dress in a certain way. It is very important, like we said earlier, for women to feel comfortable and to be seen as human, just like everyone else. Women around the world represent themselves in diverse ways, and your standard of how a woman ought to be should not be prevalent on me. I should have the right to represent myself however I choose to represent myself, and whatever the repercussions are should be on my own mental health and not yours. I always say that it shouldn't bother you. If you don't like it, you can look away and you can choose not to.
African women wearing fake hairs or attachments.
Oh.
I meant that like, how has ever this thought been considered that, a girl child, if she does not want attachments on her hair, she must not feel that cultural pressure or maybe a peer pressure. The presentation, it's not about, this really.
Oh, not about garments and everything?
Yeah, that. Like, for example, women use bleach to become lighter. That kind of stuff. That's what I wanted to know.
You wanted to?
I would like to answer, if you don't mind, because I think, my name is Dr. Monica Ababi, and I'm here on behalf of my friend, Omotala. I think that question is multifaceted, I'd like to say. I think you're saying a couple of things. One is, can women just be? Generally, and that ties in with what you said about female empowerment and gender equity, like we coined last night. That's one thing. I think when we start to stray into things like bleaching creams and hair attachment, I think we lose the message, is my view, because it's I think it's gender equity for a woman to decide to bleach her skin if she wants to.
If she wants to, which is what I was trying to say.
And if she wants to wear the longest hair extensions to the floor, it's also her choice. The same way it's your choice to dye your hair or to tan, as dark as you want to tan. I think when we start to look at specifics, then we lose the plot, because there are many women I know as well who are very proud to have their hair just the way it is.
Natural.
So I think so your message, just not to dilute the importance of your message, which for me I'm very passionate about, is gender equity and the right of women to just be who they are without any apologies, I think.
Absolutely, which was what I thought you were talking about until I realized it. So I think she's answered it adequately anyway.
Sir?
Hi, excuse me, I'm Jeff Foresti. The Project Peace Zones is one that the World Justice Project reported on. We helped start that a few years ago. And one of the reasons behind it was for us to find ways to get artists in developing countries and musicians in particular to be able to not only get their art out, but to change the world. And the work that you do is wonderful in raising awareness. How do you get crossover so that you get citizen movement that actually changes the world, especially in a time that we need such change? I mean, I grew up in the 60s, and the music there was a direct push to making serious change in the world.
Yes.
And I'd like to see that again.
Yes. Amazing. I think that lies with how the world, or the people who actually care for this sort of topics, also uplift people who are artists who are doing it. I want to give a special thank you to Time. Time gave me this platform as well. Some of the places I've been able to get into is because I've been awarded, or honored as one of Time's 100 most influential. So that has given me a very huge platform, and people who probably wouldn't have noticed me before now do. You've had people like the Telegraph write about me, and so on and so forth. I've worked with the UN, WFP, and they have done a great job also introducing me to so many people, same as Amnesty International. So when the NGOs and the forums and the platforms who care about this type of topic, or even journalists and media houses who care for this sort of things, begin to fund and to celebrate, let me put it that way, celebrate people who have, who artists specifically, who do something in this light, then you see more artists doing it. That's the problem. A lot of artists are not doing it because it probably is not profitable for them, because they are either not getting any commercial benefit from it, or they're not getting any kind of recognition for it. So you get more recognition when you take off your shirts for your fans and they're screaming, I love you. So that gives you more gratification. But if more and more artists who are doing things in the line of duty that I'm doing get some sort of celebration or gratification from what they're doing, and then other people see that oh, CNN is giving, like they do the awards for people who are using their voice or their platforms for advocacy.
Yeah,
and you see African artists, because I don't think so many African artists have been on that platform, on CNN, on that award. For example, if a movie, maybe like this one, won an Oscar, you know what I mean, then you would start to take notice. And say, okay, it's possible, I could do this, and I could still be in the mainstream. So it's a challenge to mainstream platforms and media and awards and so on and so forth, to also pay attention to artists who are lending their voices and their platforms to advocacy, and see how they can support them to be better and encourage them as well.
I'm so glad that you mentioned Project Peace, Jeff. It's a very important Arts and the Rule of Law initiative, and I encourage folks to go and take a look at their website. And I agree that mass media has this incredible amplification effect, but the world has never been more flat. I mean, you could have a cat with a YouTube video that ends up with 3 million views. You could have launched an entire K-pop genre and generation through one independently produced video. So yes, the challenges of breaking through the clutter are very difficult, but really the times have never been better for independent artists with their own voices to have their statements be picked up and to resonate with people all around the world and to be heard.
I have a question here for both of you. I think you've latched onto something really crucial, which is art working with law, but taking it a bit further and asking about also working to how do I say, to make healthcare inequality even much less. The statistics are dire in terms of access to healthcare for not just the third world, but even in the first world for certain socioeconomic groups. So I'm wondering, even with your platform, is there a chance, or if you're already doing it, incorporating healthcare inequality? And it even ties with her question about the girl child as well, because we know that healthcare access for the girl child is much, much worse than for the male child. So it might be something you've already thought about, but is there scope to also incorporate healthcare equality into what you're doing? Art is already used for healing. In the UK, we already use art to heal patients on multiple patients, mental health, diabetes, long-term conditions. We already use art as a platform, but that is more so specific. But on a bigger strategic forum like you have, is there any thought about just incorporating that with healthcare inequality?
Oh. I'm not an authority in healthcare and medication and stuff, but I know that in our own way, like this movie, I think therapy, I think art is a very, very wonderful tool for therapy. And so we have dance, we have music, we have movies to help people who are going, like you said, through mental health and all of that. But then in the mainstream, as to maybe changing, laws, as to how people can actually access healthcare. Seriously, I don't know too much about that, but it's good that you brought it up, and this is live. I'm sure people who need to really think about that now have heard this, and they can prefer some kind of solutions. I know about healthcare for artists in my country as something that we also have been thinking about. A lot of veterans are dying, and in my country, unfortunately, it's not like the UK where you have the NHS or you have good insurance policies for healthcare. So you see a lot of artists dying out of little things like diabetes, sometimes malaria. Kidney failure has been on the rise of late, and there is no health benefit. So at the end of the day, we have to go online and beg fans to raise money, which is very, very embarrassing. So I hope this platform also will bring this to light, that these people actually have a right to have these things, and that this kind of platform can raise these questions and say it is our right to have health benefits, and that it should be done now.
Absolutely, and female actors, for example, in films can role model good sexual health behavior, for example, by requiring in the film that their partner use contraception or protection, for example. Arts can also be very helpful in mental health as well. Lincoln Center has a program working with kids on the autism spectrum. We create theater pieces that specifically address the constellation of symptoms that these kids have. And it's the first time that some of them have been able to participate in an artistic experience, and in some cases, some nonverbal kids began to speak for the first time when they came to our theater pieces. We're also working with senior adults who may be suffering from Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia. The music really brings them back to a more centered place for them. Was there another question in the back?
Sorry, before that question, it's very important I note this. My husband is a pilot, And I know that the aviation industry has what I just mentioned earlier, the insurance for aviators. And so I wonder why there isn't that for other professionals, especially in the arts. So I just quickly thought I should drop that in, that we actually need such insurance policies also for artists and then for young girls, as you have mentioned. Thank you.
Ted?
Yes, hi, I'm Ted Rosenthal. I'm Lesley's husband, a jazz artist, composer, and educator, and very interested in the rule of law, as Lesley has mentioned. Question for Omotala. I think artists sometimes, as many people are, can be pigeonholed into you have one thing that you do. You're a talented actress, let's say, and it's perceived perhaps as a talent, and a certain aspect of the intelligence and thoughtfulness that goes into everything you do can not always be seen clearly. So the fact that you're an activist and take on world issues and world problems can sometimes be viewed perhaps with a bit of skepticism. And,
right.
I'm sure you've had to deal with that. So I wondered if you could comment both on that, but ultimately my question is, do you ever think about going into politics directly so you can influence the things that you are very concerned about in a very direct way, not just through the art, which has a certain bit of indirect approach to it?
I think we have a volunteer for the chairman of the Omotala for President campaign.
I can't believe he asked that, because I get that question all the time in Africa, and I was like, I'm sure nobody will ask that here, because I'm always very scared.
I just thought of it.
Oh my God. I'm always so scared to answer that question, just because I'm always on the other side. I'm always opposing the government in my country, and people know me for that. Like, I would say, I would not necessarily, I'm not partisan and everything. But I have actually shifted my thought about that, of recent. And I've come to realize with everyone telling me that there's so much you can fight for and speak about and everything, but until you actually get into government and be able to, activate and change some of these reforms, you might end up dying as an activist and just, continually shouting back and do all these rallies and talk. And so, yes, I'm beginning to think about it. I have a very great mentor called Ben Bruce right now. He's also in the entertainment industry and as well as a senator right now. And he's coaching me. I might be going into the Senate at some point in my life, and who knows, maybe more.
You heard it here first.
This is the first time I'm saying that. But yeah, so I think it's inevitable as my career has gone along that this is something that everyone wants me to do.
As a quick follow-up, would you encourage other artists to consider that?
I absolutely will, because in my country, we know that nothing is really going to change. We have the same people being recycled. Who would ever think that Fela will die and Nigeria will still remain the way it is, right? I mean, he fought. This man fought. He lost his mom to the same fight. He was incarcerated so many times, but he was fearless. And so we thought that if anything would change, it would change under his time. We had another great philanthropist called MQ Abiola, who won fairly in Nigeria. I think the first and the only fair election that's ever held in Nigeria. And he was incarcerated and he died in prison. And nothing happened. So I think we have a problem right now in Nigeria, which is the most populous nation, black nation in the world, where people have now become fearless. And people have said, if these great people can die for the rule of law and nothing happened, life went on. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. So now if you fight and everything, so you want to die, you just want to die for nothing. So that's like the slogan. So we're at a time where really you start to question if activism is even going to change anything, and you might now be left with only one option: get in there and do the work.
Bravo.
So yes, young people should please come along, because we need more and more people to change the whole system.
Bravo.
Thank you.
I think by role modeling investment in formal systems, in systems of power, I think you're showing young people the way towards a more just and fair and prosperous and equitable society. I think probably one more question, and then I don't know if you want to make a closing remark, and then I'll finish us up. Sir.
Just a quick comment. I'm Steve Wolfson from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and this to me, it's a little bit of a mixed marriage of law and art. And in the legal community, it's not something that we are automatically used to. But just to throw out one example, at the University of Maryland Law School, at the end of the semester, the students in the environmental law class don't submit a paper or take an exam. They submit a documentary film about an environmental problem that they spend the semester making. And that's maybe just one example of how lawyers could be thinking more about how to incorporate arts into advancing rule of law.
You want to take one? No, because that's more about the rule of law.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And through the teaching that I'll be doing at Harvard Law School, I'm going to be encouraging more artistic approaches by the students themselves, as well as bringing out the artistry that they see around them on rule of law issues. So I don't think it's a mixed marriage. It actually is my marriage, and it's a very happy marriage. Do you want to make a closing?
Yes, so I've learned a lot also just being in this forum, because I do like to always, add to my knowledge every time. And so many things that I've heard today, for example, about medicine and about child. I learned so much from your panel to also say. I just want to say that art is a very powerful tool. In closing, it's, I think, the most powerful tool actually to the way of life, which of course rule of law is very essential to that. And I feel that, like the movie we watched last night, you can change thinking, you can change people's perception with comedy, with movies, with music, with dance, with any form of art whatsoever. And what other people, for example, politicians or lawyers or other professions would have to stand up and fight and shout and scream about, artists actually can make possible by just influencing people, by just doing what they know how to do. I think governments, platforms like this should use more of artists to propagate topics and issues and ideas and infiltrate the society. Sometimes it doesn't have to be very harsh. It doesn't have to be too direct. They're subtle sometimes. But all artists should be brought on board. People shouldn't look at artists like, they just like to have fun, and some of them are not conscious. Every artist should be conscious because they have such a powerful tool, and it is actually needed. It is needed in this life for what we do, for what we believe in, and for our existence. And in the world right now, as dangerous as it is, we need art even more than ever. And it is possible. I hope that we can get funding for so many things that a lot of artists need to do, and that we can get the recognition and the encouragement for what we do. But it has never been, there's never been a time when it has been more needed. Art is needed now to solve so many problems in the world, and it surely can be done. It can be.
We need arts more than ever. And as you return to your countries to man the battle stations for the perfection of rule of law adherence, Omotala and I invite you to think about arts and artists for the natural role that we can play in your work, how you can unleash your own creativity, as we saw last night, and find ways in which artists can assist in your important rule of law work, and similarly, how you can help support and strengthen artists where their expression may be limited. I would like to thank the World Justice Project for including us, for inviting us, for elevating the arts to a level where it was worthy of a program in this incredible forum, and in particular to Nancy and Celeste for making our time here so comfortable and productive. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.